Welcome back. You know, I know about this story because I asked your husband. When it comes to romance, and your husband is the premier expert, wine and chocolate have been a classic gift for those wanting to show someone they love them. If you're planning on that as a gift this year, you might want to listen up.
You know what my husband looks like, right? You talk to the right person? I'm confused here. Expert sommelier Theo Rutherford joins us this morning to show us a few options and some very unique pairings just in time for Valentine's Day. Good morning. Hey, I got to text my husband right now to make sure he's watching this segment. Good morning.
Hi, Theo.
Good morning, Leanne. Good morning, Todd. How are you?
Oh, we're well.
Great. Thank you. So we're all wound up.
Why is this combination so popular? Wine and chocolate. I mean, it just seems to be like peanut butter and jelly. They go hand in hand, right?
Right. I mean, they're delicious, right? I mean, it's hard not to like either one of the two. If you don't like wine or you don't like chocolate, think you need to check your pulse. But the pairing piece is the hard part. They actually act very similarly. And that's actually one of the reasons that I brought the international chocolates, because the way the company works is actually really kind of cool. And they think about chocolate a little bit similarly to the way we think about wine. So we'll talk a little bit about why we did that in a second.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I mean, a sommelier, if you don't know, is one of those people who's extensively versed in wines and the nuances of those things and can really pair a meal with that. But when it comes to dessert and chocolates, you don't usually think of a sommelier or a chocolatier or whatever you would call
I like
them.
the word. We're going to coin that.
Yes.
But isn't it always red, though? It's red wine and chocolate, right? Those are the two that go together, right?
That's the two that most people think about. And that's actually the funny thing, is because they go together least. And the reason being is that chocolate actually has tannins in it, just like wine does. So especially if you get a darker chocolate and you pair it with a darker, heavier wine that has a lot of tannins, you're going to taste a lot more bitter than you would anything else. So actually getting people outside of that red wine bubble, which is actually kind of ironic since we have two red wines here, but thinking more towards the bubbles, or if somebody really likes Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, they're really good things to be able to pair with those two. So the key here is basically to have fun and sort of experiment, and that's really the fun part about this, because you get to drink a lot of wine and eat a lot of chocolate. So it's a win-win there.
Sign me up.
But one thing I'd say is the darker the chocolate, ironically, go with the lighter of tannin. So you can go with a Pinot Noir, or you can go into more, again, the whites or the bubbles, and then the more milk fat that's in there, or the sort of milk chocolates, white chocolates, that's when you can start steering a little bit more towards the heavier tannin wines.
Oh,
so
it's kind of reverse.
3 options right there. There's
Exactly.
a great tip, by the way. Why don't you walk us through, and the price points, too. That's always important.
Sure. So the first one we have, because bubbles are delicious, and since it's Valentine's Day, color obviously matters sometimes, with the rosé. So Josh Pink Prosecco, or Josh Prosecco Rosé, which actually just came out. The DOC in Italy did not allow people to make rosé Prosecco. I don't know why, but they finally allowed us to do it. So hence we have a rosé Prosecco here. And the chocolate we have is called Omnom. It was actually started by 2 friends in Iceland. And the whole idea here was that they wanted to take cocoa beans from certain places throughout the world and highlight those flavors. So what you'll see on the front of all of them is they actually have where those cocoa beans are from. And again, acting a lot like wine, different places around the world, different berries or different cocoa beans taste very different. So with this one, there's a little bit of licorice and raspberry in there. Now, the reason I paired it with the bubbles is because the raspberry in the rosé is going to highlight those fruit flavors. And then if you don't like licorice, that's okay, because some of the bubbles and the acid in the Prosecco is going to take that licorice flavor down a little bit. And it's actually going to pump up a little bit more of those sort of really interesting caramel flavors that licorice can bring.
Excellent. So, I never even thought about that. Raspberry.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry, with licorice with raspberry and chocolate.
Not a combination that I think we
talk
talk a lot about here.
Omnom.
Omnom.
Yeah, Omnom, right.
Omnom, yeah. All right, what do you have paired with the middle one there?
So the second one here is going to be a chocolate that actually has a little bit more, again, sort of those fruity characteristics, but there's a little bit more of an earthy characteristic here as well, which for me screams Pinot Noir. So the Calling Russian River Pinot Noir, if you go into Russian River, a lot of times you're going to get Pinot Noirs that have this really lovely, lush raspberry and cranberry and a little bit of strawberry to them. But then on the back end, you get this nice earthiness and sort of this umami characteristic. And that paired with this chocolate that has, basically, if you read the tasting notes of this chocolate, it reads like the tasting notes of a Pinot Noir. So that's why I went with Russian River and went with the Calling. And then the last one, which is going to be our Josh Bourbon Barrel Cabernet. So what we did, take regular Josh Cabernet, and then we decided we wanted to throw it in a bourbon barrel, because what's better than bourbon and wine? Not a whole lot, actually. So pumped that Cabernet up a little bit. And that way, what we're doing here is actually with this milk chocolate, there's actually, you'll see you can see here, there's a little bit more of the milk chocolate content, so 50% milk fat there. So there's a lot of fat to cut through there. So the tannins are going to cut through that fat. It's going to allow you to taste a little bit more of the nuance of this chocolate bar. And the Nicaraguan chocolate actually brings in, again, sort of an earthiness and those fruit characteristics. I know we don't necessarily talk a lot about fruit with chocolate unless there's fruit in it, but a lot of these have a really cool sort of fruity finish, which is a lot of fun.
I love that. Chocolates from Madagascar, from, what is it, Iceland? Is that what you said? That's amazing.
So they're all made in Iceland, but the cocoa beans come from Madagascar, Nicaragua,
Okay.
And then a lot of the milk powder comes from Iceland.
And remember, the darker the chocolate, the lighter the wine. If you're going to take anything away from this while you're pairing. Theo, thank you so much for the great advice. I never knew this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
guys for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Our pleasure. Thanks. We'll be right back.